This podcast is for education and information purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Welcome to the Motherhood Clinic, a podcast about caring for mothers after childbirth, led by clinical experience and real-life stories. If you're a new mum and ever asked yourself, is what I'm going through normal? Should I be worried? Or who should I ask for help? Then this podcast is for you. It's for anyone navigating those early weeks, months, or even years after having a baby. Each episode brings together voices from across the motherhood journey, from clinicians, experts, and mothers from all walks of life. We're here to help you feel more empowered in your unique motherhood journey. We believe in a better start to motherhood.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Motherhood Clinic. Namrata, for those viewing this, she is the Chief Medical Officer at 101 Gen AI. I'll let you speak in a moment as to what that is. You also have quite the resume. So I've made some notes here about everything you've covered. So one, you're a Stanford business graduate. You're also involved with VC funding at Enigma Ventures, who do big tech and health systems. You're a healthcare board advisor, or you were at MedWise AI and Palantir Technologies. You've also been heavily involved in the NHS in England. You led digital transformation. You were a board member of NHS Surrey, a startup mentor, and a GP, and you're also a mother. So you wear many hats, and really pleased that you're giving your time to us today. So thank you again. Namrata, I'll hand over to you to give yourself a bit of an intro and talk a bit about your journey as to what's led you here up to date, and maybe a few things that really stick out from your journey across healthcare and motherhood. And then I'll speak a bit about the journey of the conversation we're going to have today. Sound good?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Patrick, for having me here today. It's my absolute pleasure. I'll share a bit about my background in a sequence. So I'm a GP by training. I practiced as a partner in NHS GP practice in Surrey for about 8 years. And through that, I got involved with digital transformation for NHS Frimley, leading on their digital front door, so enabling tech to bringing tech to the health system. And then, as you said, I served on Palantir's Health Advisory Board. I came to Stanford to do a master's in management. And most recently, I've been consulting at Enigma Ventures, where we help startups raise early stage funding. We get to do their business plans, go to market, that sort of thing. And one of my customers is 101 Gen AI, where I'm the Chief Medical Officer. So yeah, that's where we are today. And as you say,
Right.
I'm a mother. I delivered my son 18 months ago. And so I started my antenatal journey in the UK and went through, the scans and the appointments, and I can share more about that. And then delivered my son in the US. So I can talk a bit about that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Namrata. So there's probably about 10 conversations we could have today. We want to focus on a singular conversation, really in your perspective of a UK GP and as a mother. And the conversation we want to have today is really about, if I were to give it a tagline, it's like what to expect when you're expecting. So this is targeted at expectant mothers or new mothers. And it's really trying to tackle, well, one is to clarify and simplify the process that they go through before, during, and after pregnancy, and to hear that firsthand from a GP that was within the NHS and a mother. And then secondly, I think it's a bit of the, what do you wish you'd have known? All right, having gone through the process, what is it you wish you had known? So that's really the two take homes for anyone listening into the conversation that I think we'll hopefully get from this conversation and from you, Namrata. So that's the landscape for today. Why don't we jump in and maybe start at a broad level and to hear from you around the overarching process, what happens, what to expect. Where do we begin? So maybe we'll start there and then we'll dive into a few of the more nuanced conversations from there.
Absolutely. So let's start with planning to become pregnant. So let's start at the very beginning. And when you're thinking about planning to conceive, I think it's really important to think about what vitamins you're taking. So prenatal vitamins, like you need to make sure that you have folic acid and vitamin D, and you can choose any vitamin that suits you. I personally went with Ritual, um, but there are many others available, Pregnicare, and see what suits you best. Main thing is that you have 400 micrograms of folic acid and at least 1,000 units of vitamin D. This is not medical advice, though, so I'm not anybody's GP in this consultation. I'm just giving you an awareness of what you need to be thinking about. And then in certain cases, you need to be on a higher dose of folic acid. So 5 milligrams for certain people who are at high risk of neural tube defects. People who've had a family history of problems with baby spines. So that's just something else to be aware of, and that's only prescribed by the GP. So if you are concerned about that, that's something to think about when you see your GP. And then I think it's really important to start thinking about tracking periods before you conceive. What's really interesting is like on a menstrual cycle, all the graphics show ovulation on day 14 of your cycle. But if you were to personally track when you're ovulating, you can do that by looking at using a wearable device that looks at your body temperature to tell you when you're ovulating, or you can pee on a stick, a little dipstick that you dip into your pee to tell you when you've ovulated. And what you'll find is people ovulate like either side of that day 14. So if you want to improve your chances of conception, you need to be like understanding where exactly you're ovulating in the cycle. And then your fertile period is about 5 days before you ovulate to about 1 day after. So that's your window for sex and like trying to get pregnant and to improve your chances of conception.
Mhm.
And then I think there's other things to think about, which is just your health, your mental health, your physical health, thinking about your, like if you've got any medical conditions, if you've got diabetes or thyroid problems, like getting your blood tests done to know where you are before. When for things like thyroid conditions, the dose of your medications maybe need to be altered in pregnancy. So it's good to have a chat with your GP about that as well. And then like a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, managing your stress, doing some regular exercise, all these things. And also talking to your partner about getting these things. Like I'm speaking to this from the point of a woman, but also like for a man to think about like alcohol, stopping alcohol, avoiding smoking, being your healthiest, because essentially you want to give your child the best start that you can. And then it occurred to me, like we get these reminders for like smear appointments and dental checkups, and like smears you can't do while you're pregnant. So also get that sort of thing just tied up before you get pregnant, so you don't miss it while you are pregnant. Those are the big things I would say to think about before conceiving.
Great, thank you, Namrata. There's a lot there. I wanted to maybe jump into some of those conversations. You've talked about supplements and vitamins, tracking periods, mental, physical health, diet, partners. There's a laundry list of things that expectant parents, mother and partners and carers will want to be aware of. My first question was how, and again from maybe personal experience, how available was that knowledge to you, and how easy, how well is that communicated? Because I think a big challenge that we hear is talking to new mothers is just the effectiveness of communication. Like, where do I get that from? We're hearing it. Hopefully, people are hearing it now from you, and they can kind of take that with the authority of you having been, being a GP. And so that's a point of trusted knowledge. What do you think? Is that how is that currently communicated, and is it done well, or could it be done better? Where do people go for this kind of information? Where should they be going?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and you're absolutely right. I do think the communication isn't there for everyone, and it is a gap, and there is so much more opportunity to provide women with more education around this sort of thing. I would say I am aware of it from practicing as a GP, training doing my GP training and understanding how to talk to women about trying to conceive and improving their chances of conception. In terms of resources, I really like patient.info. It's a trusted resource where you can go and have a look at how to prepare, what antenatal care looks like, you know, other things about what to eat and not to eat. So, for example, in those leaflets, it tells you things like avoid eating foods rich in vitamin A, and that could mean multivitamins rich in vitamin A as well.
Mm.
And then also avoid certain foods like that contain listeria, shellfish, um, like soft cheeses,
Mm.
pates. So there's a list of things that you want to avoid eating, and it's really good to just have a look at that list and see, okay, what's in my diet and what do I need to avoid eating. So yeah, it patient.info, but there is a gap, and I do think there's more
Right.
opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you. What do you think are the most common challenges that either you saw or you experienced in this period for new mothers or expectant mothers? What are the most common challenges that they face?
Gosh, okay,
If
challenge.
there is a list.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Access, I think, is it's really hard in the sense that you have your booking appointment with a midwife, your first appointment, like it it may it just comes too far along. It may be at 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and you've already been through so much on your own before you even get to see a midwife. And I think that's the hardest thing, just being on your own for that initial period, not knowing if your bloods are okay, not knowing if your baby has a, like, if you have a viable pregnancy.
Mm.
I feel like that early stage is the where you need, like, more support from the community than what the NHS can provide. So, for example, like antenatal scans, your first scan is at 12 weeks. So that's 12 weeks of being pregnant before you have a scan. And then the next one is at 20 weeks. And I completely understand from a GP perspective, there are constraints on the NHS and you don't want to do like over surveillance. But I
Mm.
think just going through that process of like managing what you're experiencing in between appointments is the hardest thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So we've talked a bit about that early stage, what to do, where to find helpful information, um, patient.info, and what you can expect on the NHS. What happens next?
I think there's opportunities to support what is there in the NHS through, for example, if you wanted to have an early scan, you can get a private early scan from 6 weeks.
Okay.
So you can supplement what's there on the NHS. If you can, I mean, there are routine midwife appointments. They occur, like you get to about 10 midwife appointments throughout the pregnancy. But I think seeing your GP if you have specific concerns, also the early pregnancy unit if you are like having pain or bleeding, like you
Hmm.
contacting them to get a scan. Um, and then there are communities for women. I'm sure you would be a better person to speak about this, but just like the Motherhood Clinic, building a community around people who are going through those early stages of pregnancy and motherhood as well.
Great. Thank you. And so, what's the next stage of the pregnancy for the mother? Where do we shift to next, and what should that person expect in that journey?
Yeah, so you have a booking appointment with the midwife. You get your bloods done. You get booked for your scans. They screen for conditions like Down syndrome.
Hmm.
They do blood tests for things like sickle cell anemia, and then you get booked for these sequential 10 appointments until you're due. You also get a chance to talk about like what your birth plan is and what kind of delivery you want to have. Do you want to have a home birth? Do you want to have it in the hospital? How do you feel about having an emergent CC section? How would you get yourself prepared for that? What would it involve? So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to digest. And, at the same time, you're going through a lot of changes in your body, your physical symptoms, like nausea in the first trimester, like maybe some like your entire body is changing, and meanwhile you're coping with your daily lives, like continuing to go to work or like do your out of work activities. So it's a big change in life, and it's great to have friends and a supportive partner, and even parents, if you can talk to them about what they went through, just to share that experience with other people.
And looking at your own experience of going through that, what was the most helpful when it came to things like your birth plan, either around how to figure out what you want or expectations you should have, or how to even begin thinking about that? What was helpful for people listening in?
Yeah, I think it's really good to talk to people who've been through it. I spoke to my sister. She had
Hmm.
delivered 2 kids. I spoke to friends who had delivered recently or been through the process, and just hearing their stories and their experiences helped me to understand, just, and that's after practicing medicine and doing an obs and
Yeah.
gynae job, and like being a GP for so many years. Just, I think, listening to people's stories and learning from their experiences and thinking, okay, well, how would I, what would I like in that situation? And then at the end of the day, it's really hard to control what happens. Even if you plan everything down to the T that you want this particular delivery, if a complication arises in the last minute, then things change, and it's just being aware that could happen. And if you planned a natural delivery and you need an emergency C-section, just like mentally preparing yourself for that is a possibility. And you may end up with like tears and perineal tears and needing rehabilitation. So things, it's very unpredictable what happens on the day, and like hearing from other mums about what they've been through really just helps you understand what that means.
Yeah. And again, it's hard. I can appreciate that. I appreciate that I'll never appreciate what that is. I mean, I've seen it secondhand, as a father. But I think a lot of the anxiety when we speak to new mothers going through the process, and also from our own personal experience, is just the not knowing. Because if there were one live event you'd want to have more control of, it would be this, right? But
True.
there's a level of I don't know, do you call it acceptance around, like, you prepare as much as you can, but on the day there needs to be a level of trust. And how do you? We've talked previously on the podcast around people that are championing self-advocacy,
Hmm.
in those conversations. And I think there's a delicate balance. There's no right or wrong here, which is, you know, the doctor is there to have you. Everyone has your best interests at heart. But I think sometimes there are challenges when the communication breaks down, and when there's a stretched system, or things are rushed, or this mismatched expectation. When you've had this birth plan and you're expecting this, you know, you have an idea of what you think this should be, because it is like the most important event of your life. And when it doesn't become that, how you then handle that, but then not just you as a mother, but everyone involved in that motherhood process. So the
Yeah.
husband, how do they support you, in what respect? I remember for myself, my wife is a consultant obs-gynae, so I felt absolutely useless because I was like, I was there obviously for the emotional support, but when it comes to, like, she's the one looking at the screens and used to looking at those, like, just be a patient. And I think you're very right to talk about how you are personally going through that process as the mother, but how do you go through that with your partner or your carer or whoever's by your side, if you have that? And I think, as you say, there's a level of acceptance as to, we've done as much as we can, and on the day, what will be, and we need to know how to react to that, and accept what happens when that happens. Um,
Yeah, and I love what you said about advocacy, and I do think we, as patients, we need to advocate for ourselves, and even the doctors want the patients to advocate for themselves, so
Okay.
their needs get met. Like you say, it's a constrained resource, and particularly in NHS care, and the more educated you are about what you want and what your expectations are, and if you can communicate that, then the health system can do their best to meet your needs as far as possible. So yeah, education is empowerment.
Good. Good. Excellent. Okay. So we've talked about, what happens in the pregnancy. Now we're at the stage where you're giving birth. Let's talk about the next stage. What happens in the NHS process? What should they expect?
Yeah, so I would I'd like to just double down on uh, before you get there, like before you're like receiving your baby onto your chest,
Mm,
like just getting ready for that moment. And
mm,
like one of the things that I want to touch on is like breastfeeding, because as
yep.
soon as your baby comes out, the baby comes from down below and it's placed on your chest, and the midwife will say, "Would you like to latch the baby?" And that is your first moment to try and breastfeed. And I think if you haven't like mentally prepared for it, or don't uh and like have a concept of what to do or what that involves, it can be very daunting that like I need to feed the baby but I don't know how. And
Mm,
um, and I think one of the ways that you can prepare yourself for this moment is like booking an appointment with a lactation nurse, a breastfeeding nurse before the before your delivery, and
right.
understanding how to latch the baby, and also like just understand like if it's something right for you, like if it's something
Mm,
that you to do. I mean, there's so many health benefits from breastfeeding. It provides immunity to the baby, like with antibodies. It provides all the nutritional components that your baby needs, and it helps you to bond with the baby. So I think getting ready for that moment of receiving the baby is like really important, and um, having a look at, say, breast pumps. If you're not thinking about breastfeeding, but you would like to pump and provide the baby with milk so other members of the family can feed the baby, then like just have a look around at pumps, and see what suits you.
mm,
Like, and I just double down on this a bit more. So for example, there are pumps that attach a cable to a wall, which does tend to immobilize you a little bit. Whereas there are also breast pumps that you can put inside a bra and take it with you, which keeps you a bit more mobile. So I would just go and have a look and see what's available and see what suits you, and have that insight and be ready for it, so that when that
mm,
moment comes, you're already like educated and aware and ready. Um, I also think getting a breastfeeding pillow really helped.
mm.
I just found that, I was like, "Oh, I don't need to buy everything under the sun." But,
Yeah.
just having it, like, it was something I wish I should have bought earlier, but it just made my life so much easier. So I like, when you talked about challenges, I think breastfeeding was one of the hardest things, because it drains so
Mm,
much of your energy, like your physical energy, to feed the baby every 2 hours. And going from like a pregnant lady to a new mum, and then now you're responsible for feeding the child every 2 hours. Like that's a huge jump. And
mm.
it doesn't matter if it's day or night. Um, so I think that's one thing to be aware when you deliver. And then I would say, like, other things to be aware of, like, your after your baby's delivered, your placenta comes out. So there's the placenta to think about. And in some hospitals, they ask if you want to keep cord blood. So
Mhm.
have a look at that. So the stem cells in the cord blood can be banked. If you're interested in keeping it for scientific research or future medical, uh, like medical treatment. So that's something to think about. And then, just like getting protecting your body and like starting that rehabilitation process. However you've delivered, you might have sutures, you might have like sutures down below where you've had a tear, you might have not slept for 24 hours because you went through this exhausting labor. It's an overwhelming emotion of receiving the baby. There's so much that happens in that like time immediately after delivering the baby, and you're now a family with a child to look after for the rest of your life. So there's so much to process in that moment and the forthcoming days.
I'm having flashbacks from just you just talking about that, and I didn't even give birth, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
it's really helpful. No, but it's really helpful to hear that, and it's another thing, having gone through the most physically stressful thing you could ever imagine, and then you've got a new life now. And I think one thing on the breastfeeding, and feeding in general, I'd never even heard of a lactation consultant. But I think it's a whole conversation. I don't know if it's for this conversation, but I feel like it's almost a separate discussion you could go even further into, because there's a whole ton of expectations and misinformation and pressure and all this stuff around how, when do you have to? And I feel that would be a really helpful topic to explore in more detail. Is there anything else we should talk about at that particular stage, or is it relevant to talk about what happens next after that?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk a bit more about what happens next in terms of the medical appointments. So, for example, when you leave the hospital, if you deliver in the hospital, you may leave after day 1 or 2. So you're going home on your own. You need a car seat to take your baby home. So that you've got to be ready with that, and then have everything at home that you need, your cot, and so just some maybe we could talk a bit about some of the products to think about, things to help, and then we can maybe talk about well, let me finish the appointment. So 6 weeks postnatal is the first time you go and see your GP. That's crazy, right? So for the first 6 weeks after you your baby, you may have a health visitor come and see you at home, check the weight of the baby, make sure that that you're like identify if you're having any problems with feeding. They'll ensure the baby is growing, like check on your mental health, those sorts of things. So health visitor comes to your house to come and check on you. And then there are weigh-in clinics where you can go to the health visitors community clinic and check in for weight, ask about any questions that you have or concerns that you have. You can book an appointment to see your GP. If you have a child has something that you're worried about, a rash, or you're worried about tongue tie, where there's a little flap on the tongue, any sort of anything that comes up that you're worried about, book an appointment, go see your GP. But the first appointment that you have on scheduled with the GP is a 6-week postnatal check, and that involves seeing the GP for yourself, checking your blood pressure, asking about contraception, those sorts of things. And also it's a chance to do the newborn examination for your baby. So do a head-to-toe examination, just looking for anything that might need to be investigated further or see a specialist for. So those are the key appointments, and then the vaccinations start. So the vaccinations start at 2 months, and then continue along the NHS immunisation schedule. So those are some things to be aware of and what's available on the NHS. But I never realised until I went through it what an experience it is to go through becoming a mum for the first time. Despite meeting so many mums and doing so many newborn examinations and postnatal checks in the clinic. So, I also think it's really important to start thinking about your emotional well-being and prioritizing your emotional well-being, prioritizing movement and exercise, and like don't neglect yourself to look after the baby. It's one of the I think as mums we all do that. We're all so tempted to we've got to keep the baby alive, and that's like everything that we've got goes into nourishing this baby, and we forget to look after ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's, thank you for sharing that. I think the key point, well, there's several key points that you've raised there that I would come back to. But the number one is you have to look after yourself, as you said. And I guess part of that is the maternal instinct, which is, you forsake yourself for the baby. But it's realizing, obviously you can step back and logically say, of course I need to be better for myself. But the emotion, as you said, is everything, and the psychology is everything but that. I talked to a lady called Lauren from Hormonally, and she talked about this it's a bit like the Pandora's box, which is, again, you only just 6 weeks ago had the most life-changing event of your life, and there's no manual. There'll be things you can do to prepare for that, but the reality will obviously hit somewhat different. And you've then got this conveyor belt of things that you need to then run through, to checklists and checkups and all the things in and amongst your own anxiety of like you creating your own checklist of things that need to be done. And as you said, I think it's finding those communities or those support networks that can help you in those times that you're seeing someone of authority, like a medical person, like a GP, as you mentioned. And really, this is not to be too self-serving, but really what the Motherhood Clinic is set up to do is to provide a more in-depth look at some of those services that we think every mother needs, and to help them navigate quite a fragmented postnatal service, postnatal experience after they've given birth. Because you're right, you have a 6-week appointment and that's kind of it. And then off you go. You're like, well, we came back. And even as it's really helpful to hear as a healthcare professional that you are as equally affected by the experience. You're no different. It's not that you're any, you've got a grace period where this is, because of your experience, you're unaffected by this. You're just as susceptible as were we, as healthcare informed individuals. We were like, what the hell has happened here? As a father, I didn't have any, obviously, of the physical implications, but just the shifts in terms of what are we doing? Like, how do I help you? What do you need? What do I need? Like, what happens? Like, what are we doing? Who decided to give me this kid? Like, who do you know? Like, who gave me the responsibility for this? It's just really a helpful acknowledgement to hear that from someone like you. And the big takeaway that I'm getting is the level of, you can never trying to prepare yourself as much as possible, and the expectation of what might happen, and as much as you can, because there's only so much you can do. A lot of what we hear from new mothers, particularly those that have had challenges with fertility, is you've invested so much emotionally, physically, financially to get to have the baby. And it's often seen as the end point. I'll figure the rest out afterwards, right? Let's make sure the baby's healthy, it's in my hands on day one, and then everything else from there. And I think the big takeout you're saying is, well, make sure during that time when you're pregnant is to do the forward thinking beyond that, because there is huge value to booking in a lactation consultant, or to think about that breastfeeding conversation and to have the conversation with your partner, so that you've done a bit of the rehearsal, so that when that reality hits, you may have just a little bit of an on-ramp to go, as opposed to, oh my God, what the hell is it? I don't know. I've never thought about this before. So I think those are just a few things that I'm picking up, having been through it twice, but obviously not as a mother. Right?
Yeah, and I think it's a good call out. Well, you say it's a huge emotional experience and a big change for a father as well. And
Yeah.
I do feel that's completely unrecognized. There are communities for men going through it. I've seen the NHS promote an app for men going through the postpartum period. So, and there is a significant number of men who experience postpartum depression as well. So I think it's important to be aware of, and also to get to seek help if you need it. Like so postpartum depression, I think, happens in 1 in 10 women, which is, it's quite high. Baby blues is low mood for about 2 weeks after postpartum, and that's really common. Your hormones are changing. It's an overwhelming experience. But when things last longer than that, more than 2 weeks, then it can become postpartum depression. So I think, recognizing that is so important, and knowing there is help is really important. Go and see your GP, talk to your friends. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so important to appreciate that it is a part of the process, and it's so common. So don't be on your own, and don't think that you're the only one. It's really common, and there's community around you, and people want to help. So if you are feeling down, then do seek help, and just call and ask to see your GP and have a chat about it if you feel comfortable doing that.
Good. I think that's a very important call out. And again, these are conversations that I'm sure we will revisit with either yourself or other guests, because I think there's, again, one of the reasons we want to have this conversation is there's so much to this. There's so much nuance to all of these conversations, but I think it's been really helpful, as saying, to get like a perspective of what things look like from a GP and, as saying, as a parent. What else are there other areas we should look at? Or is it more about like, hey, there's a lot of information we've shared to date, and maybe do we kind of just try and do a bit of a recap and for people? Or have we missed anything in this conversation so far?
Yeah, I think it's a good overview. It's hard to process everything in one go, and it's a good starting point just to think about these things. We could spend another hour just talking about the experience. So yeah, I think it's a good starting point, and enough to get going with.
Perfect.
Shall we?
Right. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to summarize some of the things we covered, but
Please.
yeah. So I'd say start with planning well. Just think about getting what it means to become pregnant, getting your vitamins, getting your health checks done, thinking about where you want to deliver, like which hospital, like where would you go and have a look around different hospitals, have a look around at the labour ward, see what the experience is like look at the reviews. So on the NHS, you can choose from a couple of hospitals within your area, and then even look at private options if you are in that position. Then I would say prepare for breastfeeding if it's something that you want to look, if you're motivated and you feel like you want to do that. It's not for everyone. Don't feel pressure. If it's just, if you are going to do it, equip yourself with your nursing pillow or pump, getting a consultation with a lactation nurse, and then seeing what resources are available to you, maternity leave. When are you thinking about going on maternity leave? Have you looked at whether you're entitled to statutory maternity pay or maternity allowance? There's even government funded childcare. So have a look at that and just see what you want to do in terms of returning to work and getting help after you uh, deliver. And then have a look at resources and communities. Join a community. I used to refer people to the NCT, but there's so much. That's the National Childbirth Trust. It was a community to meet other mums who are pregnant at the same time. That might not be available now, but have a look for communities where you can meet other mums pregnant at the same time and go through and share that experience. And know that you're not alone. Those are the things that I would want to share with the audience today.
Thank you, Namrata. I think that's a helpful, again, starting point. This is not meant to be a comprehensive review of everything. There's realms of discussion we can have, but hopefully this gives someone listening in just that oversight of what to expect in some of the key areas. So I'll end this conversation. Okay, we can give a heads up about, we talk about the Motherhood Clinic, and we exist to provide a better start to motherhood. And I'd like to ask every guest what that means for them and what does that look like for them, because I think everyone will have a certain nuance to that answer, which I think is helpful for people to think about. So I put it to you. Namrata, what does a better start to motherhood mean for you?
It's such a big question, and there's so much to
Yes.
unpack. And like you say, everybody will have a different answer. I think a good start to motherhood is just being as prepared as you can, educating yourself as much as you can, and
Yes.
talking to your partner about it, sharing experiences as you go along the way with your community, and knowing that you're not alone on this journey.
Excellent. That's very helpful. Namrata, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.